I am here today with Ashia Ajani. She's the Executive Director of Youth versus Apocalypse. And I am so excited to welcome you, Ashia, and to ask you questions about your work and what you've been doing and what you have to look forward to. So, my first question is basically, can you just tell us about Youth versus Apocalypse and its vision and how the world is different because your organization exists?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Such great questions. Well, Youth versus Apocalypse, originally, it started as a response to a lot of environmental justice issues, and climate issues that were happening in and around the Bay Area. There was a lot of, adult mobilization, but the youth aspect wasn't as included. And, a lot of youth were recognizing that, they are now they are, I used to be youth, they are inheriting a planet that is so much different than the ones that their parents inherited. And to not have that youth aspect in environmental justice space, in climate justice space, it didn't really make sense, because young people are the ones who are going to be bearing the brunt of climate burdens and environmental burdens. Not only are they going to be, but a lot of young people inequitably currently bear the brunt of environmental justice and climate justice issues. Young people, children are a vulnerable group. A lot of our youth are living near toxic facilities. A lot of our youth have asthma. A lot of our youth are experiencing, these very embodied experiences of environmental injustice and climate injustice. And so, as Youth versus Apocalypse matured and kind of organized over the years, we recognize that, it's really important to have very specific campaigns that young people are working on. And these are like campaigns that young people have self-directed and they've self-chosen. So an example of one of these campaigns is actually pretty recent, which is our Stop Oak expansion campaign. Oakland Airport is proposing to add 16 new gates on already vulnerable marshland, and it would contribute to noise pollution and air pollution that is already currently in the area. And a lot of our young people live there, and they are already, dealing with the side effects of noise pollution, of air pollution, and to add 16 new gates without any sort of checked, expansion would just be totally detrimental, not only to our young people, but to the environment. And so really what we're trying to do is we're trying to mobilize young people to not only care, because they already care and they care deeply about these environmental issues, but we are trying to mobilize a critical mass of young people to get involved, to make their voices heard, to deliver actions, to change policy. And by doing so, we're able to change the course of some of these environmental injustices that have long been happening in and around Oakland.
That is awesome. And actually, one of our recent guests was like a super local group working on the Bayview neighborhood
Mhm.
in San Francisco and gave a lot of great examples of how health problems can arise directly and generationally as a result of those things.
Mhm.
It was really, really moving. I love that you talked about campaigns because that's kind of my next question is like, what do you have going on right now? What do you have coming up that like a small grant from Blue Heart might be able to support and move forward?
Absolutely. So, a lot of our organizational model starts with our school-based organizing. So really, the campaigns that we have, they are established and they are chosen, but they become emboldened and they become more, sustainable when we have more school-based campaigns. In order to have school-based campaigns, we believe that it's really important to compensate young people for their work. We are working with, folks who are in college. We are working with folks who are in high school and trying to provide mentorship, generationally, intergenerationally. And so to be able to do that, we are really focusing on expanding our school-based organizing. In doing our school-based organizing, getting into more schools, having students who are involved, in Richmond, in Oakland, in Berkeley, we're able to build up mobilization behind those campaigns. So one example is one that I spoke about earlier, which is the Stop Oakland expansion campaign. And we're, not the only ones who are involved in this. We have like 80 plus grassroots organization who are against this expansion. So part of that, this campaign work is we're not working in silos, right? We are working with community members. We're just adding in the youth component. The other one is, divesting from the California State Teachers Retirement System and moving invested pension funds from fossil fuels to students. So we're trying to make sure that, not only do teachers get the money that they so rightfully deserve, but that counselors at the retirement system is not funding fossil fuels and is not going into fossil fuel systems that are detrimentally harming not only, teachers, but also our young people. And another one that I'm really like a big fan of is it used to be hip hop justice, but now we're calling it, our cultural strategy committee, which engages cultural and artist practitioners and youth among around climate issues. They just put out a really dope zine. There's performances. Basically, the idea is like, how can we use creativity and artistic expression to communicate climate issues and also build up and draw and dream and speak the world that we want to see into existence.
I love that so much, and that's also been a part of Blue Heart since the beginning. Is supporting art as its own project. So there's always been a little bit put aside for a creators fund to support people in moving the message out there in whatever ways they find compelling, and it's a great way to move everything forward. So my next question is about you. So how did you come to Youth vs. Apocalypse, and what's your history before and during?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go a little back and then I'll kind of like I'll bring it forward. I am originally from Denver, Colorado, which is unceded Cheyenne, Cheyenne, Arapaho and Ute territory. And growing up in Denver, Colorado, I think like people outside of Denver, they have like one particular view of like Denver as like this like area that draws in people who love to ski, and there's like a lot of like outdoor stuff. And that was, in some parts my experience, but I also lived during a period of rapid urban renewal, which led to the decimation of historically Black and historically Latin neighborhoods when I was a young kid. And so I was really confused, as someone who loved the outdoors, who loved nature, who loved public parks, why my community members weren't having access to that. And not only weren't having access to that, but were being forcibly removed by this urban renewal process. Folks who had started community gardens, folks who had planted trees, folks who had contributed so much to what the lifeblood of Denver was, and folks were getting removed. And so, that was really a pivotal moment. This was happening kind of like in when I was in middle school and high school. This was a really pivotal moment for me because, I could see these things happening and I was like, well, like how are we mobilizing against it? And so that's where I started kind of the basis of my education and my organization career. I definitely saw environmental issues and social issues as like intertwined. Like it was hard for me to separate the two based on my experience. And so when I went to college, I was not really sure what I wanted to major in or what I wanted to study, but I had always had this love of teaching and this love of education, and I'd always had this love of environment and this love of creativity. So I ended up doing my degree in environmental studies. And from there, I just started doing more curriculum writing. I would look at, and this is not to knock like any outdoor schools or any like, environmental education spaces, but I was like looking and I was like, where are the people of color, in these curricula? Where is our narrative around environmental justice? Where are our experiences? And so, both in that lived experience and just not seeing it reflected in curriculum made me want to get more, critically involved in how do we repair some of the harms that have happened, not only through the school system, but also on the land. So when I came to Oakland, I started working with an organization that did environmental justice education, climate justice education with young people. And when I say justice education, it's not just, oh, we're going to be learning about stuff that's happening in the past, but stuff that's happening right now and how folks can get involved and how folks can make change. And so that was really my background, was doing a lot of curriculum writing and curriculum development. And then Youth versus Apocalypse, an organization that is really, really great at mobilizing young people. I'm coming from the piece of like, okay, how do we just make folks aware and get them involved? But Youth versus Apocalypse is really good at mobilizing young people and really good at getting policy influence and getting, like social systems change. That model was just so amazing to me that I just had to be a part of it. And I came to Youth versus Apocalypse, with that sort of like creative background, with that curriculum writing background. I'm really excited to hinge that creativity to some positive action.
That's awesome. So glad to hear more about you and your work for the past few years. Um, so you told us already one example about meeting a need. So when you heard that Oakland Airport was planning on expanding and increasing the volume of flights, you saw that that might negatively affect locals and especially young people in several ways. Are there any other examples that come to mind of youth versus apocalypse, like meeting a specific need?
Mm. Yeah, I think that our no one is disposable model really has helped not only in terms of like mobilization, but it's also helped other orgs that are like doing like youth work see what's possible. I think even the framework of no one is disposable is very influential and very necessary during this time. There's this idea, it kind of bases off this idea that there used to be, and there still are in a lot of ways, these kind of sacrifice zones where if you live in a certain zone, well, tough luck. But what Youth versus Apocalypse is doing, using that kind of like just transition framework and applying no one is disposable, that has like really influenced the way that we are committed to environmental justice in specific communities in Oakland, getting regional support, getting on certain committees, developing youth comfortability with speaking before city councils, attending actions, making their voices heard. I think that that is one framework that has really like pushed the work forward, and also has served as a site of inspiration for other youth groups and even other like environmental justice groups in and around the area.
I love how that connects with what you were saying earlier about embodied work, because there's this sort of abstract idea of like no one is disposable, but like in the work that you're doing, it's like literally like there are bodies and people being impacted directly by this. This is not an abstract concept, you know? Um,
Mhm.
so the flip question as a follow-up is what are some needs that Youth Versus Apocalypse has? What are some of the biggest challenges that your organization is facing?
Yeah, I think that, we're in a very transitional time because we work with young people. We love our young people, but they have so much that they are doing outside of Youth versus Apocalypse that we are, in a very transitional period. We're doing recruitment, we're getting more young people involved. And so, at this moment, I think a big thing that could be really supporting is our Gen Ops. And we would love to hire, we would love to support youth both like with like stipends financially and like leadership development wise. We work on a model of like we always like to compensate our young people for their work, and we also like to provide them with leadership development. And you need staff to be able to do that, and you need bodies to be able to do that. And so as we're kind of navigating this pivotal time, the spring semester is like rapidly coming to a close, as we're looking towards fall semester, and building up, our membership, building up our retention. I think that that's something that will be like completely really, really helpful. And then also, on the flip side, I think just partnering with other organizations who are doing similar work. It's great to connect, and join forces. Again, kind of in that model of like no one is disposable and just transition. We recognize the power of community and we recognize the power of mobilization. And so, it's like a twofold. We have like the funding need, and then we also have just like the buy-in, like the physical buy-in, that's so powerful too.
Thank you. So, in your wildest dreams, what would Youth versus Apocalypse look like in 10 years? And what's standing in your way, if anything?
Oh my goodness. What would Youth versus Apocalypse look like in 10 years? Hmm. I would love for us to see some major wins in terms of sustainable development and degrowth. I think that one of our things that we're really like focusing on right now is how do we sustainably like grow in Oakland? And when I say sustainably, I'm not even talking about Youth versus Apocalypse, but how can Youth versus Apocalypse start prompting some of these, difficult conversations around renewables, around, like land use policy, around, like housing development in Oakland. And on that note, like retaining people in Oakland, in and around Oakland, making sure that people are around to see the beautification and the development of their communities. I think that that is like a really big issue here in Oakland and in the Bay Area at large. We want to see climate justice. And the reason that we have this justice model is that not only do we want to see, like climate security, but we also want to see people to be able to stay and to experience that beauty and to experience that sustainability. And so I think, in 10 years, I'm hoping that Youth versus Apocalypse, being this very strong youth contingent, which is really unique because in a lot of ways, youth can't vote, but we can influence how other folks are voting and how other folks, are pushing along policy. We can propose policy and we can get, we lovingly call them like yelders, which are younger elders. We getting them involved in social change based on, like youth desires. I think that that is something that I'm like really looking forward to. And in my wildest dreams in the next 10 years, I do think is thoroughly feasible and thoroughly possible. As of right now, we are an org that works in schools, but we don't really have an office space. I would love to have like a central location where young people can come and learn and be together and build together. And, even doing some, there's some restoration work on the shoreline, getting young people more involved in that sort of like, like material development of their communities to the end of folks being able to stay. And of course, I feel like the dream is always having like a little bit of land where students can grow and learn and be and play and be free. And to that end, having like healthy land. I think, there's like a lot of remediation that has to happen in and around Oakland, but I would love for Youth versus Apocalypse to be spearheading that and to get the funding to be able to make those things come true.
I love that. I asked you about your wildest dreams, and you were like, "Well, yeah, I got
I
this
have a
sorted
list.
out and laid out in a 10-year plan, and it's a
Mhm.
good one." Okay, so my next question is about your allies and supporters, like me and Blue Heart. What are some common mistakes you see us making? What do you want to give us a heads up about?
Yeah, I think that a lot of funding can be like very siloed. So it's for like very specific campaigns or very specific developments and complete and or like very specific actions and completely understand that. I think the reality is, that a lot of us just need gen ops support. We want to be able to pay folks like a living wage. We want to be able to retain folks. I think that that's a big thing. We want to be able to, like build our base through retention. And so like having more like gen ops funding is always like really helpful. And then on the other side of things, just like speaking us up, like being curious about our work. I think that, sometimes, and it's not all the time, but I think like if you're not like really embedded in like the on the ground work, it can come off kind of like prescriptive of like, oh, you should do this, or oh, have you considered this? In a lot of ways, we know what we need and we know what we want to do. We just need like the means to do it and the means to enact it. And so kind of having a little bit more of a what would you like to see and what would you like to develop and what would you like to do? Because if you ask most people, like even if they can't like develop like I just did like put out like like kind of like this 10-year plan, they have a very clear vision of like what they want to pursue and what they would like to see done. And then next is that next part is just like the financial means and the scaffolding to do it.
Thank you for sharing that feedback. Um, so I don't have like too many more specific questions, but I do have one more sort of general one, and feel free to cover whatever you'd like in this one, which is basically what else would you like to share? What would you like our listeners to know? Anybody who listens to the podcast or sees social media to know about your work and how to be a good ally in your work? And what would you like us to share with others?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a like a lovely offering. Our youth are just amazing. They're really, really dope. They're inquisitive. They are thoughtful. They are curious, and they are so inventive. And I think, just given that kind of transformative energy that is already within the youth, there's so much potential to help like co-create the Oakland, the Bay Area that we want to see. And a lot of that power, and a lot of that just like drive lies within the youth as well. And so, I think as someone, who is very squarely out of like the youth age range, but kind of serves as a conduit between like some like folks who are a little bit older and then our youth. I think that it's a really awesome opportunity to do some like deep listening to our young people, to provide more like intergenerational support, to really be honest too about like what are some things that y'all have seen, what are some things that y'all have experienced, but not in a way that's like, okay, y'all should do this, but let me pass on this information to you so that you can see like there's like a whole lineage behind the work that you're trying to enact, and to provide that mentorship support for our young people. I think a lot of our young people have like really dope ideas. They have definite things that they want to see changed. They have like a very like palpable energy. And I think that it's really up to us, to help direct that energy into what they want to see.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, this is a sort of like the organizational model of our conversation is sort of a one-off, but I hope that our relationship is not. So if you think of any more opportunities for people from Blue Heart to connect with you or your youth ongoing, please be sure to reach out and stay connected for sure.
Of course. Thank you so much, Anna.
Yay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ashia. It was a pleasure to speak with you and to hear your message. And yeah, I hope to stay in touch.
Likewise. Thank you, Anna.